Hey guys, I'm Alphos. I'm a super competitive Marvel Snap player. I take card games way too seriously, and today I'm here to show you my deck that I took to a tournament. It was my first time ever playing. I had literally not played a single game before round one, and I ended up going 5th place with 3 wins, 1 tie, and 1 loss. So today I'm going to show you the deck. Essentially the same deck that I used to play in that tournament, but I've gone back and optimized it and ended up going 22-0 on Pixelborn, the online simulator. So here's the full list here. This is the final list. I've been using this exact variation card for card for about the last 8 games. 22-0 overall, so there were some card changes over the first, was it 12 or so games? 14. I can do math. The general idea of the deck is that we're using some purple support as a draw engine so that we don't run out of juice as we're trying to apply pressure onto our opponents. A green overall is very good at applying pressure through questing mainly, but also through sort of being unavoidable for your opponent's removal and other monsters for effects such as evasive and ward. We also have some cards slotted in here specifically to hedge against the mirror, against other aggro matchups, and against one of our main threats in the game that's sometimes an unfavorable matchup depending on the build and how good the player is, which is Steel Amber. So I'll be getting into more detail later about specifically how I've built the deck to counter those matchups, but for now, let's start off with this next slide. So here we have the general strategy of the deck. First up is some early game aggression. I mean, you guys know aggro decks, so you want to be questing as quickly as possible to get as much lore as possible to hit that 20 threshold and win. You can't always hit face though. Sometimes you have to go for smart value trades. And what I mean by this is that if you're in a position where you can sacrifice some pressure in the questing department in order to take control of the board, and you have to make that judgment to decide whether it's worth taking your pedal off the metal a little bit, so to speak, so that you can ensure your opponent can't catch up with you. Tempo swings are really important, especially with green, and with this deck specifically. We have cards that are great at it, such as Mother Knows Best, which bounces a card to hand for free, and Genie, which not only bounces an opponent's card back to their hand, but it's an evasive body in and of itself that quests for 2. Another thing you have to do, especially against control decks like Ruby Amethyst or certain builds of Steel, is that you need to play around removal. Strong removal cards in the meta sometimes are unavoidable, but for a few, like Steel's Bring Your Sword, Raise Your Sword, I can't remember the actual name of it, but I'm going to use them interchangeably for this video. Is a deal 2 damage across the board. So I have built the deck specifically with that threat in mind. First off, for our key cards, we have Pascal. This little guy is absolutely incredible, super underrated card. Oftentimes, if your opponent doesn't have a way to deal with evasive cards, then you get 2 of these guys on board. They give each other evasive, and you can just quest for 2 every single turn until you win. I did have an opponent during the tournament that didn't believe me that they would activate each other's evasive because they claimed that another character in play meant it had to be a different character's name. But I did go and check that with some judges, and it turned out to not be true. So take advantage of Pascal if you can, mulligan for 2 if possible, and you'll be in for some easy games. Next we have Maleficent, just a really strong card in general. When you play the character, you draw a card. Easy as that. Everyone likes drawing card games, right? And next we have Friends on the other side. This draws 2. Pot of Greed, anyone? Any Yu-Gi-Oh players? It does have a slightly higher cost though, because you have to use free mana, but you can cheat that cost by using Maleficent to sing for free. Genie, the most goated card in the deck, in my opinion. Being able to not only bounce a card to swing the tempo back in your favor, but also quest for 2 while being evasive and having a stat line that dodges most of the area removal in the game is absolutely crazy. Kuzco, another bonkers card. Ward means it cannot be chosen for any effects, whether that be an action removal card or an effect removal card, such as from Steel's Tinkerbell, to choose 2 damage. So the only way you're going to take damage with Kuzco is with area damage or with attacks from other characters on the field, which you can sort of play around by controlling the board more. And it quests for free, which is just an insane amount of pressure. If you're top decking this late in the game against a control deck, it's basically impossible for them to deal with it. Tinkerbell, another insane card. Think of it as like a genie. You can play at 4 without the bounce. You can quest for 2. It's pretty bonkers. It applies some insane pressure fairly early on, and can often close out games just by being evasive and free health. Its effect, Pixie Dust, can also be used to avoid Bodyguard, and let your characters hit other evasive characters. Lastly, we have Mother Knows Best. Great tempo card, bounce a card for free. You can sometimes even sing it for free for your free drops, such as Maleficent. Very strong card overall. However, it is uninkable, so we're only running 3 rather than 4. As for the meta threats, we have the Amber cards here that are quite strong. You Have Forgotten Me. Each opponent chooses and discards 2 cards. This is quite troublesome for us because we really rely on being able to spend our card advantage quickly to generate tempo. So if You Have Forgotten Me gets played early on, we could end up losing the cards we need to close out the game. Simba, very powerful card with tech specifically against it so that we can trade into it with Olaf's and Megara. But aside from that, you can also use Tinkerbell to make it evasive, so then you can hit cards like Lilo that are being protected by Simba. So we do have a few tools to get around it. However, I would be scared of this card still. Ariel doesn't look like a crazy card on its own, but it carries the effect Singer 5, which lets the Steel Amber deck play the Bring Your Sword card on turn 4, which is absolutely nuts and can completely ruin your game if you aren't careful. So if you have the chance, bounce the card with Mother's Knows Best, or if it's been exerted, just trade into it. It's sort of too dangerous to leave on the board for too long. Next we have the Silver Meta threat. Grab Your Sword. That was the name of the card. You know what? I don't think I got it right a single time. I've been saying raise and bring your sword. It's actually grab your sword. I apologize, guys. I'm still learning the game. I've only been playing for a few days. But yeah, that card's absolutely bonkers. Always respect it. Always be aware of if your opponent can play it on the next turn and play around it. Sometimes it's better to just trade a card on low health and let it be taken out with Grab Your Sword. So especially with your cards like Genie and Tinkerbell that have 3 and 4 health, you're going to be able to be slightly above it. And with the evasive, it means they can't be targeted in other ways. Tinkerbell is another card to respect. Has a very strong effect of being a strong body that quests for 2, and with a battle cry, Rock the Boat. When you play this character, deal 1 damage to all opposing characters. Between Grab Your Sword, Rock the Boat, and Red's Be Prepared, these are the only area removal tools in the game, and they're very strong. So you gotta always be playing around them and be careful. This also means if you see a normal Tinkerbell, a free cost Tinkerbell, if you have a chance, bounce it or trade into it just so that they can't get a cheap Tinkerbell Giant Fairy out for free. You also want to be careful if there is one, unfortunately, that's stuck to the board, about it swinging into one of your cards and dealing 2 damage to another card. This way they can access your evasives. So be more careful about your non-evasive cards questing and trading if they could be attacked by a Tinkerbell afterwards. Smash is a very strong, efficient removal tool. It only costs 3 and they can deal 3 damage, which lets them take out our Tinkerbells and other evasive cards and free health cards. So you can't really play around this too much, but just be aware that it's there and try and apply enough pressure that they're forced to use it on your 1 and 2 drops. Lastly, we have Ruby. Ruby has Be Prepared and Dragonfire. Be Prepared is the most insane AoE removal in the game. The only reason I lost a game in that tournament, lost a round in that tournament rather, was because of Be Prepared. I wasn't aware that the card existed, and I had a really strong board set up on turn 6, and I was ready to win the game next turn, and then they played Be Prepared, completely swung the tempo, and I ended up losing. You can play around it. Sometimes playing around it means not playing any more cards on turn 6, letting them play Be Prepared on 7, and then continuing to play your cards after that. The main way you beat these sort of hyper-control decks is by forcing them to use their removal inefficiently, such as Dragonfire, which banishes any chosen character. It costs 5, so if you can get them to use it on a 3 cost, 2 cost, 1 cost, rather than one of your more high-value cards, then you're in a pretty good position because you've wasted their most powerful removal tools that should be saved for your genies and your Tinkerbells. Next, we have some combos. For combo number 1, we have Megara plus Olaf. I mentioned this earlier. It makes Olaf a 3/3 that takes out Simba and lives on 1/1. Pretty strong combo, very niche use case, but it's enough to tip an unfavorable matchup into a more even matchup. I haven't lost to a Steel Amber deck yet with this list, and these 2 cards have made it much easier. You can also use Tinkerbell, as mentioned earlier, with the Pixie Dust ability. You can give Simba Evasive, which will let you ignore the Bodyguard ability and has your non-evasive cards be able to target other cards. Because the Simba is evasive, Bodyguard doesn't trigger since your non-evasive cards actually can't challenge the Simba. A pretty insane interaction. During the tournament, I actually had a judge called on me for using this interaction, which is pretty funny. They did rule it in my favor, and my opponent was pretty displeased. Yep, combo I mentioned earlier, 2 Pascals. The evasives trigger each other. You can just quest every single turn until they get removed, and if they can't get removed, well, you're pretty much going to win just off that amount of tempo. Next, we have Maleficent into Friends on the other side. Mentioned this earlier. Very good for drawing cards and making sure you don't run out of steam. Friends on the other side and Maleficent are also pretty good top decks because for most of the game you're going to be sitting on 6 ink. So if you top deck a Maleficent or Friends on the other side, you can play it, draw more cards, and then hopefully play another free cost for tempo. For this section, I have what I would call a bad cards, but in reality, they're just what I would think are inoptimal cards that you shouldn't be using as substitutes in the deck, though they are tempting at first glance. Maleficent seems very tempting at first glance for an aggro deck because she quests for 2, and she's a 1 cost, but we don't have any bodyguard cards like Simba in the deck, and we don't have any access to them in our colors, so in reality, you're just not going to be able to quest with them because they get traded for really easily by literally any 1 or 2 drop in the game, so I would not recommend playing this card. It's also uninkable, so it'll brick your hand more. Next we have Befuddle. I can understand why people would be tempted to use this card, but at the end of the day, we're in an aggro deck. We need to be putting bodies on the board along with our removal so that we can quest. Befuddle's just too slow and antithetical to our game plan of ending the game quickly. I would understand. I think this card's a lot better in mid-range and control decks, but you'd be wrong to put it in an aggro deck. There's also Peter Pan. I've actually seen this card in a top 8 like $1,000 tournament list for PPG, Pro Play Games, in America. I think maybe the card worked for them because the meta wasn't as developed. They had a lot more Ruby Amethyst over there than the Amber Steel I saw at my local tournament, which seems to be getting more popularity. The reason you wouldn't want to bring it is because it only quests for 1, and while it is evasive, it's got that crucial 2 health threshold, which means it dies to grab your sword. Which makes it overall not a very good card because it's not sticky enough to apply enough pressure throughout the game. And lastly, we have Megara. Now, the acute ones amongst you may have noticed that Megara is actually in my deck. I wouldn't recommend this card normally. Like, it's very much a meta call, and if you think, your local scene is following the meta and is playing Steel Amber or any other important free health, 2 frees, I would run the Megara and Olaf package just so that you're able to trade efficiently with those. If that deck ends up not being popular, then you can probably substitute Megara for Cruella de Vil and substitute Olaf for a 2/2 like Archimedes or the green 2/2 that I forget the name of. I think it's Duke of Weaselton? Weaselton. Maybe, who knows. Anyway, last slide, we have the mirror. For an aggro mirror, your main problem is, what if this guy just draws a better curve than me, quests more than me, and is able to outrace me to win? This is why we have cards like Jasper, with the insane ability of we get to quest and deny one of our opponent's quests, which slows them down while speeding us up. Pretty bonkers in an aggro mirror. There's also John Silver, crazy 6-drop in an aggro mirror, can be still pretty decent in other matchups too, because he's a 5/5 that quests for 2. When you play this character and when they quest, who's an opposing character gains Reckless, so they have to challenge and can't quest. If you set up some favorable trades, John Silver could be an absolute MVP of a card up there with Genie in the 6-drop section. And, you know, he's not very bricky either because you can ink him. Okay guys, and we're into game 1. Here's the mulligan. In general, we're looking for just a playable curve. We do have Olaf and Megara, which isn't as strong since we're going first, but I think maybe we keep it anyway just because they're inkable. I'm going to get rid of... You know what, I'm actually going to keep Tinkerbell because we already have our 1, 2, 3. I think the only thing I'm going to mulligan is Rafiki. You know what, actually, I don't think there's any reason to mulligan Rafiki. It's not inkable, but it's still a good card, so I'm just going to keep this hand. This is the rare occasion where I haven't mulliganed anything. I think because we don't know the matchup yet and we're going first, which puts the tempo in our favor, we're safe to ink Jasper, and then we start off with a Pascal to apply some pressure. Okay, so our opponent's played a Maleficent. This is the two quest card, the card that I don't think is very good. So one way we can counter this card is that instead of playing Megara, we can just ink the Megara. They're pretty unintuitive, right? But by playing the Olaf, we can set up a good trade here so that if they do decide to quest, we're trading our 1-3 into their 1-1, and we can still quest with Pascal. So this will let us keep board control and keep the tempo in our favor. If they're smart, they probably won't even quest with the Maleficent here, but they're using Simba to get around that. So it's a bit unfortunate that we decided to ink the Megara, because Megara would be good here to trade the Olaf into the Simba. I think what we do now is we just keep... we can use the Rafiki, actually, to make a favorable trade. So we can swing a lot of board tempo here. I think, as much as I like Pascal, I think he needs to be inked here. And then we're going to Rafiki, trade into the Simba. That's a nice trade. You know, we still stay alive. Olaf trades into Maleficent. That's another nice trade. We stay as a 1-2, and then we quest with Pascal. So now you can sort of see a deck building difference here because we had cards that had better stats but traded into them. Even though they had a higher quest card, we're sacrificing questing in the short term to create board controls so that we can quest more in succeeding turns. And usually Amber is a color that wants to keep board presence and hold it, so I think we're in a pretty dire situation at this point. Unfortunately, we bricked a bit here with 2 uninkable Mother's Knows Best, so we're going to ink for Cheshire Cat, which I would have liked to play eventually, and go for a Tinkerbell. It doesn't matter where we apply our evasive here, and then we're going to quest for free. We're in a pretty commanding position here, and since we're playing Amber Amethyst, they don't have access to Steel's removal cards, like Bring Your Sword, Grab Your Sword, I still don't remember the name of it. So I don't think there's much we can do about our board here. This game just feels like a win. I don't think they have the answers. You know, Amber's got some very nice late game power, especially, you know, with its draws, and, you know, Lilo's a great card too, but just don't see how they're going to keep up. What we can do here is, because the Rafiki only quests for 1 anyway, we can play Friends on the other side, exert the Rafiki to draw 2 more cards. I don't think there's no point in playing Mother's Knows Best here, so I think we hard play the Friends on the other side now for free. And nice, this gets us some more cards for ink, I think. Just so I can play the Olaf. We're going to ink for Cheshire Cat. Playing Olaf will give us another good trade into Lilo. And then we play Olaf, and we just quest. Keep applying that pressure onto them so that they can't recover. Now they can choose to trade the Simba into us somewhere. I think if they did it anywhere, they do it into Olaf. But then we can still trade into the Lilos if they decide to quest. I'm hoping to draw another inkable next turn so that I can play John Silver. Maximus is a very strong card. They're hoping that Simba and Maximus will be enough so that we can't get to their Lilos. Unfortunately for them, we're playing green, so we can just play Mother's Knows Best. Yeah, so I think we ink the Flynn Rider, and then we go for hard playing John Silver, which will stop. I guess we might as well just stop the Lilo from questing, yeah? So that Lilo can't quest next turn, so we don't even need to remove it necessarily. And now we can play Mother's Knows Best by tapping the Rafiki. So we can bounce the Maximus back to hand. Trade into the Simba with Tinkerbell. And then trade into the Lilo that we haven't John Silvered. And then quest for one with Pascal. And now we have a pretty insanely strong board. We're going to be able to quest for 7 next turn. And we still have another Mother's Knows Best in hand, in case we decide to play some large drop to try and stabilize that board. I wish I had some water here, because my throat is parched. You know what? I want to look nice on camera, so I'm going to fix my hair too. I've got some priorities while we're waiting for our opponent to take their turn. So they've played out another Maximus here. It feels like somewhat of a struggle play. I think they're going to try and trade the Lilo into the Rafiki probably, since it can't quest anyway. Yeah, I mean this is pretty unfortunate. We're gonna play the we're just gonna bounce their Maximus back to hand. And their bodyguard's useless once again. Play the John Silver so that their Maleficent can't quest, and then we quest with the rest of our board. And yeah, that's a guaranteed win. Nothing they can do here. I don't think purple and amber's a very strong combination, especially not into this deck, so just deck difference with this game. I don't think there's anything they could have done better. I mean, this is a really good example of how oppressive this list can be. If you don't have the tools to deal with my board, then you're just going to lose. And boom, they retreat. And here we are into game 2. Pretty simple mulligan here. We've got a 1, we've got a 2, we've got a 3. I think all we do is mulligan our high cost cards and our uninkables. It looks like in the top left, our opponent is actually quite a high ranked player, so this should hopefully be a more interesting game. Captain Hook is somewhat scary because we don't have any 2/2s. 2/2s are best at dealing with Captain Hook, and we don't have a Megara in hand. I think what we're going to do here is, because our Olaf's going to be less good, we ink the Olaf. And we probably should have inked the Mad Hatter here, actually. And then play a Pascal. I mean, we still have another Olaf, so it doesn't matter too much. I think if they're going to set up these really strong cards, we're probably not going to be able to trade with them, and we're just going to have to try and outpace them with quests. Yeah, I still don't like playing Olaf here because we don't have a Megara, and I'd like to keep the Mad Hatter just so we have a 5-drop in hand. So I'm going to ink the Olaf, play Flynn, and now we're safely going to be able to quest with Pascal. Captain Hook's pretty strong here because we can trade straight into our Flynn. And the discard's less powerful when they have a Beast Mirrors on board. Because even if they go to 0 cards, they're going to be able to tap this for free to draw a card. Not the best card in the game, but it's pretty okay. Ariel's scary here. This is what I was talking about with these Steel Amber, especially the control secs. Boom, they've just searched, grab your sword, put it straight into their hand, and now they're going to be able to play it on the next turn if they want to for 4. Oh no, sorry, even for free, just by tapping exerting the card. Pretty scary. I think we're going to have to somewhat play around this here, knowing that they can play a 2 damage all card, so we're probably going to have to play something that lives that, and I think in that case it's the Cheshire Cat that we want to play. We could also play Megara here. I don't think that's the best option, to be honest, but maybe we save it in a hand as a possibility for next turn. I think for now we don't really need the Mad Hatter, so I'm going to ink it, and then we're going to play the Cheshire Cat so it lives a grab your sword, and then we'll just quest for free. I'm hoping they don't grab your sword here so that they maybe quest with the Ariel so that we can trade into the Ariel. If the Ariel trades into the Flynn, then we could Megara the Cheshire Cat and then trade into the Ariel. Would be somewhat ink inefficient though, as we'd be at 4 ink, so we'd need another 2-drop to make that play worth it. Okay, so they've just straight up played the grab your sword. It was good we played around it because our Cheshire Cat lived. I think now that they've played the grab your sword, we're actually... I mean, we're safe anyway to play the Tinkerbell because it lives it. I think it's a really good time to play it now. We don't have board control, so I don't think Hans is ever living for more than a turn here. So we ink for Hans, play the Tinkerbell. It doesn't matter where we place evasive because we're just going to quest with Cheshire Cat. Yeah, I'm not liking our position on the board here. That early grab your sword was really damaging, and it's going to be quite hard to recover against a steel amber deck late game. As long as we keep inking every turn and just playing evasives, we might have a chance. I'm surprised they didn't use the smash on our Tinkerbell. Maybe they have another smash? So they played grab your sword. Tinkerbell lives it because it's a 2-free, showing the importance of deck building around meta threats like that card. Tinkerbell's going to be able to keep questing for 2 unless it gets hit with something else. I think we need some draw, we need some more tools, so we're going to play Maleficent, draw a card. We've got 3 friends with the other side, so I think we'll ink 1 and then play Megara. Its effect isn't going to do anything here because we're just going to quest with Tinkerbell. Especially in matchups like these where your opponent really benefits from going to the late game with all of their super powerful cards, it's very important to apply pressure as quick as you can and get to as high of a lore count as you can. Oh, it looks like we've disconnected, but we're back into the game now. Got a weird invalid deck bug, but hopefully still be fine playing the game. Luckily their cards don't quest for very much, so even though they've got 3 cards on board, they're only questing for 3. We definitely want more options to draw cards here, so we're going to play Friends with the other side, exert Maleficent. We're still drawing into 2-drops. Not ideal at all. I have a feeling they might play that card that discards hand and draw 7 cards, so it's probably good to spend our cards now. I think I'll play Pascal, play Flynn, then play Megara. I think Megara, I'm going to give the other Megara +2, so that we can swing into the aerial, which takes away their option to play a Bring Your Sword for free, and then we'll quest with Tinkerbell. The only way this play loses is if they have a Bring Your Sword, but at least if they do have it, it's going to cost them almost all their ink. They've already, yeah, no, there we go. And they've already played a Bring Your Sword, so they would have needed to top deck it. Takar, I haven't actually played against a Takar. During your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, you gain 2 lore. That's pretty insane. Luckily, we only had 1 character that could have lost to that. So Takar, yeah, is looking like a card we might want to bounce or destroy if we get the option. I think here we're just going to keep questing. Going to play Kuzco. Consider trading into the Prince Eric. I think it could be a good idea. Just so that they can't get too much benefit out of the Takar here. Yeah, so I think we trade Megara in, we trade Flynn in, even though it would have been nice to quest for the 2 lore. And then it also means we're going to get 2 less lore from trading into us a turn later on their Takar turn. And having Kuzco up here is pretty insane. We're threatening a win, and they can't specifically target it with any abilities, and they've already used 1 Bring Your Sword, and they're top decking, so currently they have no way of actually removing our Kuzco. We're really looking for a bounce card here, ideally. Yeah, Beast, not going to do anything. They're going to be able to gain 2 lore if they swing Takar into Flynn Rider. The discard card effect isn't going to do anything because we already have an empty hand. We have some interesting options on next. We're going to be able to quest for 5, I believe, if we quest with everything. I really want to get rid of a Takar, so I want to dig for a bounce card, but I don't know if I want to use all my energy doing it. I might sacrifice a turn of Tinkerbell, so it's so our Kuzco can live. So, I mean, it wouldn't live the Beast anyway. I also don't want them getting lore from it. So the question here is, do we care if they're able to trade into our Kuzco? Because we're only going to get +2 lore from the Kuzco. I think the best thing to do here is just hard play, draw from the other friends on the other side, and look for a free drop. We did indeed find a free drop. So I think we can play Tinkerbell here, and which will let us play Rafiki. And then we trade Rafiki and Pascal into the Takar, which limits their options to trade and to gain lore from trading. Now we can just quest for 5. And now we're in the primo position that this deck wants to be in. We're only 1 card away from being able to quest, so even if they cleared this entire board, so many cards in our deck could just go on the board, quest, boom, done. And Kuzco has the great effect of when it gets just... I honestly forgot about this effect because my Kuzco almost never gets challenged and removed. But when it is challenged and banished, we get to banish the challenging character. So boom, there goes their board. If they don't have a way of dealing with Tinkerbell, they lose. And this is against a top-ranked player too. This person is rank 1, which I think puts them at like the ranking system 1, which I think puts them at like top 20 in the leaderboard or something like that in the world for Pixelborn. Correct me if I'm wrong about that system. I'm still new to the game. They're really digging here for something to help them. They're not going to be able to find it. And that's GG. We win. That is game 2 against a meta deck in Steel Amber Control. And, you know, what I assume is a really strong player because they're highly ranked. Boom, there's the concede. GG guys, that has been my deck. That is my Emerald Amethyst Aggro / Tempo deck that I got 5th place with in my first ever Lorcana tournament, my first time playing Lorcana. The overall scoreline for the deck now, I believe, is 24-1, because after I went 22-0, I did lose the 23rd game to bricking with a bunch of uninkables and not getting to play not getting to play cards for 2 turns. I think having 24 wins and 1 loss, that's a pretty good win ratio. This is also a budget deck. The only expensive cards are Kuzco and John Silver. Everything else is as cheap as biscuits. I don't really know a good phrase, but yeah, go try the deck, go win some locals with it, maybe even give it a spin on Pixelborn before you invest into getting the cards. And let me know in the comments what your favorite color in the game has been so far. Alright, see you guys, have a good one.